Notebook number 5. 1. In 1989, I entered my third year of college. Through the course of my post-heartbreak purgatory, in those 18 months of being cut off from the object of my desires, I was a blind man fallen into the ocean. I spiraled downward, deeper and deeper inside myself, until I sank to the seabed and slipped into a sinister cave in which Shui Ling's beckoning was the only sound. Sometimes her call grew distant, and other times it drew nearer. Finding myself at the border of life and death, I followed her echo as it led me toward death. Shui Ling was the only thing I had that was real. That year, my attic bedroom on Tingzhou Road became like a coffin in which I lay awake at night, painfully alone. She was the only one I'd been close to, and now there is no place where my reality converged with the outside world. The look in her eyes, the sound of her voice, snatches of her conversation. Those sensory impressions formed a leech that attached itself to me and started sucking my blood. I sealed the leech in a plastic bag and kept it at a distance. But then I discovered white foam spilling over my windowsill. The ocean was depositing its frothy residue, filling my sanctum with wave after wave. To my horror, she insistently lived on inside of me. That was how I started to see things. Or maybe this was a product of the schema that I'd long been using, unconsciously, to block out the outside world. That way of seeing had gotten me far in this world. But now everything I'd achieved in my first 21 years of life, connections I'd forged, status I'd earned, talent I'd nurtured, possessions I'd acquired, and traits I'd developed, were at the mercy of a death wish that negated it all. I'd always been surrounded by people who cared for me, but no matter how much they loved me, they couldn't save me. It just wasn't me. I never let others get too close and simply paraded a fake me that resembled their image of me. Sweeping that other me into their arms, they led me in a dance within societal norms, along a trajectory based on a delusion. Though I couldn't define what I was, I knew what I wasn't. I was shown the limits, and being confined within a set of walls tormented me and drained me of life, for the real me spanned multitudes, stretching far beyond the bounds of normality encircling 90% of the human race. There was no one I wanted to share my thoughts with. There was nothing I could do to lessen the pain, no source that I could pinpoint. Secretly, though, I did sort of enjoy being a fucked up mess. Apart from that, I didn't have a whole lot going on. Who was the real me then? It was an abstraction that hadn't yet taken shape in my lifetime. Self-actualization became the fulcrum that my survival rested on. Like a convict being hauled off to prison, I handed over my clothing and jewelry, which were to remain locked away in storage, and in turn I was given the key. I would wear the uniform of a prison convict for life, as that alone was permitted. My greatest longing was to use that key, so I could steal a glance into Shui Ling's eyes, which were so full of life. I'll tell you the kind of person I was. In the eyes of the average person, I was a woman, but that vague semblance was an illusion, an easy category. In my own mind, I was a beast straight out of a Greek mythology, a centaur. Like that beast, I'd willingly and madly fallen in love with a woman. Since I'd managed to shake off this woman's affections, I'd succeeded in fleeing from all the desires and fears that came with having someone special in my life. Over the course of 18 long months, a distant flame had been ignited and passed from one candle to the next across a great distance, until it would finally arrive at my darkest hour, illuminating the candle I held before me. Until then, the intermittent flicker of that flame was enough to console me. No matter who I was, no matter how anyone else saw me, no matter whether I knew who I was, somewhere on this planet there was someone who'd completely accept me, who'd been trying to figure me out all along, who genuinely loved me. And that right there was the truth. It hit me one night under a cobalt sky. It was during the summer vacation of my third year, on the cusp of late summer and early autumn, and I just moved to Gongguan Road. The evening air was cool. I was sitting at an intersection of Roosevelt Road and a brick road next to a musical instrument shop. The piano melody of Thanksgiving played in my head, putting me in a meditative mood as I took a few soft drags from a cigarette and reflected on the 5 years that had passed since I'd left home for Taipei. People had come into my life and left without a trace. Late at night, I sat in a desolate corner of the city, dispatching lone smoke signals. The gears of memory, now warmed, were set in motion. Scenes of life with my family when I was little, each of us children leaving home in succession until it was my turn, and the scrawny kid lugged her bags all the way to Taipei. My high school years, filled with secret crushes and the camaraderie of friends who laughed and cried together, later torn apart in the process of growing up. Even if we had prevented that estrangement, our former kindredness would be replaced by a pained silence if we were to meet again. My college years were spent among people who were like oil and water, unable to form bonds. A few friends had broken through my shell and made me less alienated, but I didn't treat them well, and it was my loss. My only salvation, Shui Ling, was as short-lived as a rainbow. What the two of us had was an achievement on par with landing on the moon, then floating in space with zero gravity. Images of all these people flooded my mind. Some emotion of mine, whether love, pain, or sorrow, had been preserved in each of their faces. But there was no escaping separation, which was left to the mercy of fate. One by one, those dearest to me had disappeared, and my memories, which I had so closely guarded, were ultimately of little consolation. My thoughts were Ari. Separation awaited regardless of which way I turned, ready to reduce me to a baby chick shivering in the rain. My eyes welled over to the sounds of Thanksgiving, and I set my bottle of beer down between my legs. My tears were not those of pain, but of remorse and acceptance. Separation was the thing I'd been dreading the most these past few years, and I'd been in denial that it was a fact of life. Refusing to let go, I'd practically thrown a temper tantrum. What's worse, my attempts to avoid separation had only hastened it. It explained why I'd always been so quick to lash out at those I loved. My realization was akin to discovering the lost city of Atlantis. In my navy blue sweatpants, I strolled back to the main road. By day, the streets of Taipei were noisy, congested, and putrid, but at night the scene was tranquil. I sat down on the steps of the pedestrian bridge. I'd spent countless lonely nights atop countless bridges, thinking about the people I loved, the people who made me who I was. I knew I'd been here before, on this bridge illuminated in purple. These bridges were all the same, and I'd sat like this before, with my arms around my knees, watching the world below. The beer tasted bitter. God knows how much I'd drunk in the 2 years I lived alone, but it was clear I'd been having one long silent cry. I simply hadn't thought of it that way before. Then it hit me. If I died, what difference would it make to the world? After all, no matter who I was, my death would be no more significant, nor would I be spared from lonely nights. And really, what difference did the world make to me anyway? With that question, something stirred deep inside me, making my body tremble. It did make a difference. I had needs like anyone else, and sure, one of those needs was a little acknowledgement. But the problem was the way I loved. It was the very cause of my pain. A second later, I was leaning over the side of the bridge retching. My stomach had purged itself, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. I had to let go of the people I loved. The words came with a mouthful of vomit. In one violent lurch, as if my jaws were pried open and the contents of my stomach were ejected, leaving only the whimpering mess that was me. The image of a tomb flashed in mind, and I knew it contained all that was dear to me. It was shown to me like a geoglyph, a giant symbol of my connections to the universe at large. I wailed. No matter how loudly I sobbed, the sound was drowned by the noise of passing cars. I'd taken everyone I loved and killed them off in my heart, one by one. I'd been long tending their graves, secretly visiting and mourning during the day, going out and erecting a cross on starry nights, lying inside and awaiting my own death on starless nights. That was my Atlantis, the kingdom I'd built in the name of separation. I'd never before unearthed so much of myself, and so suddenly at that. Inside the world of my tomb, everyone else was dead. I alone survived, and that was the reason for my sorrow. It didn't take long to spot the largest sarcophagus. It was the one in which Shui Ling had been entombed, and across the front it read, "This woman is madly in love with me." And then reality finally hit me. I had my old schema, which offered a peephole, really, to blame for my decision to leave this woman, to kill her and preserve her body in this sarcophagus, where she'd stay mine forever. I'd evaded the perils of real relationships and robbed her of the ability to change with time. These two prospects had given rise to my deep-rooted fear of a real separation, which in turn yielded the avoidant mentality that had only hastened it. That's where I was after 18 months. I didn't want to see or talk to her, and I'd no longer allow her to set foot in my world. The paradox, of course, was that my love for her would grow. Her corpse would remain in a sarcophagus where I kept her closer than I could in reality. And I continued believing in that unchanging world, which I was at peace with. It was as if Shui Ling simply went on living her life, and it made no difference whatsoever to me. But Shui Ling was living her life here in the same city as me. There is no doubt about that. So then what? 2. 1989, Shui Ling, Gongguan Road. My Romantic Tragedy, Round 2. There, it's for you. It was a winter morning in a season identical to the year before. I'd just finished a swimming lesson and was shivering from the cold. On that rare occasion when I'd woken up early, the athletic fields were covered in a layer of dew. I was riding down the sidewalk when a bicycle cut across my path. A letter was tossed into my basket before the bicycle turned and sped off. I almost squealed. It was Shui Ling. "What are you doing here?" Pedaling fast to catch up to her, I managed to find the warm and gracious tone I'd always reserved for her. I'd imagined this scenario a million times before, and now it was happening. Over the past 18 months, I'd spotted her on campus from a distance from time to time. Having been burned once, I decided to make a break for it if she actually approached me. I was sure that if she started talking to me, I would die. I never expected to stay so calm. It felt as if my tears were absorbed by a giant bath towel before they could seep out, and there I was, as cheerful as ever. She didn't notice me, and yet she didn't seem entirely focused on writing either. She stared at the road ahead, pedaling slowly, as if in a trance, oblivious to the sights and sounds around her. Her purple scarf. I was supposed to be the masculine one, and yet her elegance in a simple scarf and jeans left me weak at the knees. I rode alongside her until we reached the intersection. No matter how I tried to coax her, she continued straight ahead. As I waited for her to cross, my now softened heart was wrung by the thought of being involved with her again. I stopped and watched her ride into the distance. I went home. After intense deliberation, I headed back to campus and sat behind her in class. Unable to look away from her, I stared furtively instead. Her expression hadn't changed. Engrossed in the lecture, she seemed to be off in some faraway place, and it only stirred pangs of misery inside me. I squinted. She was within arm's reach, yet there was a canyon between us. I could practically touch her, but every time I summoned all my strength to sidle up to her, to reach out to her, I imagined myself backing away again and again. All I could do was stare. She'd been silently resisting me for a while now. She wanted to avoid me, to get away from me. Meanwhile, I was trailing her like a spider gliding across a thread. The purple envelope she dropped in my basket contained a vaguely sad poem, conveying the sentiment that it was meant to turn out this way. And with that, the conflicting forces of attraction and repulsion were set off. Desire was piqued in a mix of rapture and pain, and I completely lost myself. She walked with her head lowered, casting a glare my way a few times. Once we reached the lakefront, she stopped and turned to face me. Her eyes widened. A sudden boldness eclipsed her shyness. "What do you want?" "I don't know," I replied, feeling at once innocent and prepared to show my old brazenness. I knew I had her. "What do you mean you don't know?" she snapped. One moment her temper flared, and the next she'd broken into a self-indulgent smile. She turned toward the lake and sat down on the white metal bench, poking a finger through the yarn of her red sweater. Her face slowly flushed. Sorry, I lost control for a second. You pedaled right past me out of nowhere. I wanted to see where you were going. You lost control? Tell me, what do you expect me to do when you lose control? If things have changed, fine. But if they haven't, then why can't they be like they were before? No, not like before. She shook her head forcefully. Her expression was stern and unforgiving, as if I'd done something dreadfully wrong. I'm with someone else now. Those unexpected words came out as she shook her head frantically. For the past 3 years, every fall had been the same. The wind had swept across the surface of Drunken Moon Lake. The surrounding trees had swayed in a verdant mass as the lake quivered lightly. The vivid sensations of the season had filled my lungs, invigorating me. Last year and the year before that, I'd stood alone in the middle of an autumn field, a fleck of color, a minute consciousness within the vastness of nature. Now that consciousness was jolted by her words, and it widened in a blur, erasing me. Like a pair of lovers who'd been exiled to opposite ends of the earth, we tearfully embraced each other. But in the end, I was left standing alone on that autumn field. Her resentment toward me hadn't been evident earlier, but now I understood her pain. If I were to bemoan the fact that she had found someone else, she too would understand my pain. It was a final standoff between two beasts. The bare teeth of one tore into the flesh of the other in an expression of love commingled with hatred. Incapable of licking each other's wounds, the two of us could only stand face to face and lament. And as if that were not enough, the new someone was a woman. The words cut into me, leaving me speechless. Shui Ling said that just a few days ago, on her birthday, she'd been given a ring by the new someone. She'd agreed to go out with her and even promised to study abroad together. While I was secretly leaving roses on Shui Ling's doorstep, she was returning home from a candlelit dinner wearing that other person's ring, glowing with renewed desire. Before that, she'd been waiting day and night for a sign. Once again, out of panic, she'd made an impetuous decision and was tied down before she knew it. She'd waited for me for 10 months, she said with a smirk. Her gaze was stiff. After the two of us had been practically inseparable, and after the excruciating heartbreak that had followed, she'd fled into someone else's arms. They were like daggers, her eyes. So she found someone who was better at intimacy than I was. But she didn't want a man. That would only mar her pristine memories of me, she said. We'd always be together in her heart, even if she was with someone else. No one could take that away from her, especially not me here and now. My heart ached. I felt guilty for having put her through such an ordeal. I felt bad for driving her away with my latent self-destructive behavior. Yet out of this morbid, deranged love of hers that pained me to the bone, out of fear of losing the entire significance of her past, she was treating the present me with violent animosity. God, I wished I was dead. This woman had to be part of some hellish eternal recurrence.